Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on this week's episode of The Walking Dead, Some Guy. As always with these reviews there will be full spoilers for the entire episode, so I suggest you watch the latest installment first before watching this video. Anyway, let's not waste any more time and get straight into it. So far I've had very little to complain about concerning this season of The Walking Dead. I've really enjoyed the action heavy start to season 8 that we've been treated to, as well as the speedy pace of the show when compared to the last couple of years. However, as mentioned in previous videos, I have felt that during the first 3 episodes the weakest link has been the ever-present story arc focused on the soldiers of the kingdom and their eccentric leader Ezekiel. I don't think their scenes have been terrible by any means, but I just think that when compared to the ongoing battles that Rick, Aaron and Morgan have been partaking in, the kingdom just hasn't really been given anything extremely interesting to do. With that in mind, you can understand why I might have been a bit cautious when realising that almost the entirety of the episode Some Guy would be focused on the exploits of Ezekiel and his subjects. Well, in all honesty, it turns out I really had no reason to worry at all, as after watching Some Guy I feel it may actually be one of my favourite episodes so far this season. The 3 episodes that preceded this week's entry all had great action sequences but didn't have a huge amount of heart. I don't want that to be taken as a criticism, everyone knows I've enjoyed all the episodes thus far, however I feel it's sometimes hard to have real standout character moments when the show is moving at such breakneck pace. However, I feel this latest installment managed to create an almost perfect blend of exciting action scenes and powerful character focused moments, making it an all-round excellent watch. The episode begins with a flashback to the extremely confident Ezekiel rallying his troops before they begin their assault against the Saviours. The fighters enlisted from the kingdom clearly love the king to death as they eat up every single word he says. After his speech is finished they all crowd around Ezekiel attempting to get a touch of him, giving the impression they feel like he's some kind of prophet sent from God. Now, I'm not going to lie, I did find this scene and particularly Ezekiel's speech to be a bit cringeworthy. I mean, I honestly lost count of how many times he said the word smile. Nonetheless, it did make for an outstanding contrast when compared to the horrific scene that would come after. After preaching an awful lot about how he would not lose one of his ranks, Ezekiel woke up to the aftermath of last week's cliffhanger to find pretty much his entire battalion riddled with bullet holes, dead on the battlefield. It was a pretty unnerving scene exacerbated by the look of horror glued to Ezekiel's face. Speaking of horror, I found the sight of the not long dead soldiers reanimating in order to feast on their leader to be pretty damn creepy. It's been a long time since I found walkers on the show to be scary, and I feel that The Walking Dead's creative team did a great job of making me fear for poor Ezekiel's life. The king struggled on by his lonesome until an unnamed saviour found him, with his intentions being to take him back to Negan. I have absolutely no idea who this guy is, but I thought his performance was absolutely superb. Yes, he was more or less playing just another evil saviour, which the show definitely doesn't have a shortage of at the moment, but boy was he sinister. His comment pointing out how the people of the kingdom were still following Ezekiel even though they had died was pretty sick and disgusting, but also genius at the same time. He also just had this really eerie look and nature about him, and to be honest I wouldn't have actually minded if he had survived the episode to be seen again in the future. As things stand though, he's pretty damn dead. I mean, he did get chopped in half by an axe, but if you are going to die you might as well go out having a memorable death, and have one he most certainly did. Jerry was the man to come to Ezekiel's rescue, and it was at this point that Ezekiel had a crisis of confidence in which he exclaimed that he wasn't a king but just some guy, referencing the title of the episode. We've seen Ezekiel allude to the fact that his whole king thing is an act when talking with Carol in season 7, but since then the topic has been largely untouched, with Ezekiel being his over-the-top self since. Yet here we saw him stripped down and vulnerable, clearly hurting from the loss of his people, which caused him to doubt whether he had made the right decision to be the leader of the kingdom, or if he had just been a fool the entire time, attempting to pull off some elaborate sham. I feel that this moment did a wonderful job of humanising Ezekiel. I believe that despite his quirky nature and mannerisms when playing the role of the king, he has always fulfilled the role for the right reasons. Seeing him question himself and his decisions ended up being rather difficult to watch. It was certainly not as difficult to watch however as the death of his beloved companion Shiva. Although I predicted Shiva's death at the start of the season, it still didn't make seeing the act unfold any easier. With Ezekiel struggling to walk as he, Jerry and Carol battled their way through a swamp of walkers, Ezekiel made the noble decision to stay behind to allow the two of them to escape. With time running out for the king, cue Shiva to arrive to take care of the walkers, opening up an exit route for her friend. It was heart-shattering seeing the look on Ezekiel's face as the majestic animal became overwhelmed by the walkers surrounding her. Hearing him scream that he needed to help her only to then be dragged away really managed to hit the tear ducts. It may be considered a bit strange, but I actually felt more emotional when seeing the death of a CG tiger when compared to finding out Eric died last week. Although The Walking Dead never explicitly showed us any footage of Ezekiel and Shiva during the beginning of the outbreak, you really get the impression based on the way Ezekiel spoke about her that the two of them had been through everything together and had a real special relationship. Seeing this ended by some rotting soulless husks was cruel and upsetting. I also think it's kind of poetic that Ezekiel came to Shiva's aid when she hurt her leg whilst at the zoo, and Shiva came to his aid when his leg was hurting. Shiva, you will be missed by many, although I'm sure those responsible for The Walking Dead's budget won't be shedding too many tears. Moving away from Ezekiel and now on to Carol, as this week the walking weapon was really given an opportunity to shine. I mentioned last week that I felt that Carol had been underutilised this season, and this week's antics more than made up for her limited screen time so far, as she attempted to wrestle a huge automatic gun from under the Saviour's noses. Although Carol is a complete badass, as illustrated by her quick thinking in hiding between some ceiling panels before expertly taking out a line of saviours, I did think it would be a bit silly if she ended up taking down the entire base on her own, and I'll admit I was worried The Walking Dead might be going down this route. Thankfully, things were never made that easy for her, and like the sequence in which Ezekiel found himself squirming on the floor attempting to flee the dead, there was a real sense of tension and build-up attached to her action scenes. At one point she even ended up being cornered and outgunned by a group of saviours. With there being no cheap machine gun hiding up the sleeve trick available to help her escape the situation, she managed to take a saviour hostage in an attempt to talk her way out. The saviours responded by taking a leaf out of the movie Speed's book and shooting the hostage. Well, I don't remember the hostage dying in the film Speed, but you get my point. What followed was a standoff, but with Ezekiel and Jerry outside the gates of the compound, struggling to get in with a mass of walkers gaining on them, Carol became stuck between two choices. Choice 1 being stop the saviours and grab the guns, and choice 2 being help Ezekiel and Jerry. This moment kind of reminded me of when you're playing a video game and two options come up, but it's so obvious what the good option is and what the bad one is. I don't think for a moment anyone really thought she would sacrifice Ezekiel just to claim some guns, and I'm glad that she made the right and sensible choice. I did find it a bit strange though that there was no real consequences for her letting the guns go, making having the illusion of choice a bit pointless. Instead of the two saviours taking the guns back to Sanctuary, Carol told Ezekiel and Jerry not to worry, as it turned out Rick and Daryl were both chasing down the runaway saviours anyway. In all honesty, I have absolutely no idea how Rick and Daryl fitted into any of this. I don't know how they suddenly managed to turn up in a nick of time at the right place. If anyone can explain it to me, it would be much appreciated. Despite their appearances seeming sudden and out of place, the car chase that ensued was a thrilling way to cap off a great episode, and I'm expecting to see more of Rick and Daryl next time. I've often criticised The Walking Dead in the past for having too many episodes devoted to only a handful of characters, forcing the viewer to wait weeks to check in with the other members of the cast. However, this latest episode Some Guy proves that if the storyline and writing is good enough, sometimes casting the spotlight on a couple of individuals instead of an entire group can work wonders. Ezekiel was undoubtedly the star of this chapter, and he managed to carry the episode on his shoulders, creating an emotional and engaging instalment of The Walking Dead. This week's entry was still action heavy and fast paced, but it also had more of a focus on the characters and people of the world that exist within the show, which in my mind helped it become the best episode so far this season. So there you have it, my review of the latest episode of The Walking Dead. As always, please let me know your thoughts below, and until next time, thank you very much for watching and goodbye.